So good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this morning. I'm obviously super excited to be back in Australia and Sydney, as always, on a lovely day. As John pointed out we're at the sharp end of this thing now. And what I want to talk to you today about is the very deliberate nature of how this product moves from here through the FDA and into market. Because I get a lot of questions, more comments about what we can and can't do as a small company, from folks who maybe don't necessarily know what we can and can't do as a small company. So today I'm going to walk through, obviously, the financial results from last year, but also give you a view as to what's coming this year, particularly around the FDA and those things. I'm going to start with a little video. We've compressed about 4 years into 4 minutes here. And the reason I did that is to show how this product came about, that it's not a random event. The fact that it's clinically superior and market leading is not a random event as well. It was all very much calculated around a business plan when we had a blank piece of paper. So hopefully by the end of that 4 minutes, you'll have a clear view of what we do or how we got here. The disclaimers, of course, and this.
How do you take a blank piece of paper and build a multi-billion-dollar medtech product? Step 1, adapt. Start with an exceptionally well-studied building block with the best anti-calcification profile out there. Adapt. Step 2, market analysis. Analyze the market for where to best utilize this material. Land on aortic stenosis. Step 3, study. Study the disease to understand the unmet medical needs that existing products do not solve. Determine whether it's possible to solve this problem. Step 4, build and expand. Set up and expand footprint in the global MedTech hub, Minneapolis, USA, where supporting infrastructure and access to talent enables quicker development timelines. Step 5, assemble advisory board. Assemble the bona fide best physicians in the world in this area to give input for what is required. Step 6, R&D. Take a very, very deliberate approach to solving the unmet medical need based on research. Step 7, pause and analyze. Remind yourself the product needs to be significantly better to be clinically and commercially viable. Step 8, assess problem. Approach the problem by understanding why existing products do not fulfill unmet needs. Step 9, product development. Design product and develop brand new class of product to address the existing issues. Step 10, clinical results. Demonstrate best-in-class results in multiple studies. Step 11, expand results. Demonstrate other aspects that have previously not been seen, such as normal physiological flow. Step 12, valve-in-valve. Demonstrate great results in the very worst settings, such as valve-in-valve. Step 13. Go with the flow.
Product is that good. That's a good way of looking at it, but the product is that good in the marketplace. Fred at 45 minutes dancing around there, maybe not 45, but obviously I'm in a lot of these procedures. I see the patients not long after and next morning as well. They are literally night and day from previous treatment. That normal flow that you saw at the end, that has a big impact above and beyond what's available today. Hopefully that demonstrates that getting a product that is going to be a market leader is not a random event. It's planned, it's calculated, it's deliberate. And frankly, if we couldn't do that, the company wouldn't exist. It wouldn't need to exist because there's no investment thesis for you guys if the product isn't me too or is not competitive, which means both clinically and of course commercially. So, and the physicians, I should just add this, physicians have a benchmark they call the MUM test, all right, with any product, and a product has to pass the MUM test. What that means is, would you put it in your own mother? And all the physicians we work with who are the top physicians in the world in TAVR, this product passes the MUM test for all of them. So, nice anecdote. I'm going to look quickly at 23. Obviously, it's past us at this point. I'm going to talk a lot more about 24. 23 was a year where we swung for the fences, and I'll explain what that means, or for my folks and friends here, we hit a 6. That's a big claim, and we did big stuff. One of those is we got approval for and passed our what's equivalent of a phase 2 study, or an EFS. In Medtech, it's called EFS. In pharma, it's called phase 2. It's the same thing. Then you'll see companies publishing phase 2 results. Now, in pharma, phase 2 is more risky than in Medtech, by the way. When you're at phase 2 or EFS in Medtech, it's much more, the risks are much more mitigated than they are in phase 2 in pharma. I worked in global corporate big pharma my whole career around the world. And phase 2 is not a safe place to be. Phase 3 cannot be safe at times. Medtech, because it's a physical device, is very, very different to a compound or a chemical. So the risks are much, much lower at that point. Our phase 2 or EFS study was not only approved, but completed its enrollment. We didn't have promising results. We had market-leading results. And that you can take to the bank. The results were read out in November, December of last year at the major conferences. I'll talk about that. But these were 30% superior to the market-leading product. That matters a lot. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the financials, I think you know pretty well. We finished the year with 30 million in the bank. Doesn't mean a lot these days. Sales revenue, I want to talk about this because this, of course, is not the way to look at this company. This company is a medical development company. The payday is when we came out the other side, and of course, that's where this product is headed. Sales revenue does reflect the fact that we do provide the adapt tissue, which is an amazing technology in itself, to a company in the States called 4C, who's working on a mitral valve replacement, so a different area to aortic valve replacement. Very big space as well, pretty untapped. They're doing okay. So this agreement we have with them, they're actually not far from us in Minneapolis. We supply them with tissue. Should they get approval, go commercial, we'll supply them with a lot of tissue. So keep that in mind. A little bit of other revenue. We manufacture the CardioCel products under license to the company that we sold that portfolio to, called LeMaitre, which is a NASDAQ company in Boston. And that pretty much covers the revenue. We're sitting at about 100 people between Australia and the US. That is significantly under the number we actually need. So folks are working hard. We are probably 20 to 30% under the headcount we would typically need on the technical side to get stuff done. So people are really pulling out the all stops. R&D costs have gone up, obviously, in 2023. That's to reflect where we are with the clinical trials. There's a lot of clinical trial manufacturing and development. You have different people come in to run clinical trials. You have different people come in to run the QC stuff and the FDA stuff as well. So that's all built around where we are in our life cycle. We raised about 79 million in capital. Same metrics here. I just want to just point out here that the uptick in costs in R&D is important. It's not frivolous expenses. We sometimes get those emails, drunken sailors and things. That's not what this is. We don't spend a dime that we shouldn't be spending here. But this is to get us through the FDA process as quickly as we possibly can, of course, without cutting corners, which you can't do. But there are costs that you just have to incur on the way here. But of course, we ran our phase 2 or EFS study. There's a cost with that. The valve and valve procedures cost us, but they're very, very important in terms of the investment thesis. The valve science program, I'm going to show you, that's where we see the laminar flow and all these other things that other products don't do that we also have to prove on the way to market. We're going to take that discussion where the other guys can't come with us because, of course, they've got patients. Manufacturing, of course, gets bigger as you're providing and making product for the trials, right? So that's where we are with that. Medical affairs, critically important. That's where the studies come from. And regulatory affairs, if you don't know what these terms are, the reg team are the folks that interact with the FDA, right? Specialists in FDA documentation, getting through negotiations on pivotal study protocols, designs, biostatistics, the math that goes with that. So if you haven't worked in the medical space, these are all critical functions. They're not nice to have. You don't get through without them. One thing that hit us, and I really just looked at this recently for the first time in a long time, but the AUD really tanked after COVID. If anyone trades pair currencies to the USD and the AUD, you'll know when to go long and short on this. But you can see that impact is quite dramatic, down to 66 cents. And all of us probably remember back in the day pre-here when we were almost trading at parity, which is would be great for us to be in that one-to-one position, but we're not. We're down to 0.66 or whatever it is today. It swings around 4.64 to 6.7, something like that. It's not awesome. But it has a very real impact. It's unavoidable, but it is what it is. We spend in US dollars for the most part because a lot of this stuff, the manufacturing, the development, all of that stuff, of course, happens in Minneapolis in the States. So we spend in USD. We raise on the balance sheet. I mean, we raise from US investors as well, but of course, it's reported as AUD. Now, when you look at this change, for the 36 million that we spent on expenditures in the US, it translates to 54 million. Okay, so when you see this reported in Aussie dollars, salaries, costs, everything else, it looks far bigger than it is. Now, $1 in the US does not buy you more than $1 in Australia, even though there's a difference between the currency exchange. Pretty much $1 there buys you what $1 buys you down here in terms of the R&D stuff. So we're spending 36, but it's reported as 54. No way around it, but it's important to note when you look at those costs, this is what they actually are in USD. So it's quite dramatic. All of that said, the SP, I know it's been fairly flat for the last 12 months, but since we consolidated the stock, it's up 210%. There are a lot of companies who are not up 210% in that same period of time on the share price. Again, if you didn't buy another share at that point of consolidation, you're still up 210% on your portfolio, right? It's not like you have to keep going. We have a very small number of shares on issue with a very big net present value. So as we add capital, of course, we add shares. This is not a stock where you have to be worried too much about your dilution in your holding if you're not going to buy another stock, because the upside of this market cap, which I'll show you, is quite dramatic relative to the number of shares we have on issue and the risk factors of us getting to market, which are, of course, very low at this point. Still not a bad performance. I get a lot of feedback on consolidation, $20 stock versus a $2 stock versus a 20-cent stock. I would say we're not digging holes in the Pilbara here. Okay, this is a product that's moving through the process to be approved, to come to market. It will do those things. Market cap has moved slightly since consolidation. So again, we get a lot of feedback on consolidation. This was, I guess, reflective of where the company was before we had this kind of product. By no means is that reflective of the value of the company or what it should be today, but it certainly shows, and you can see where the first human patients came in and so on here, that it's moving. And I think that's as good as I can hope for in terms of numbers over a 4-year period of time. Not sure that there's a lot of companies that have achieved an 1,800% increase in market cap in 4 years. But also we've outperformed our major competitors, Medtronic, Boston, and Edwards Lifesciences. So these are the big TAVR companies, these two particularly, globally. Of course, they're headquartered in Minneapolis with us. You can see again what happened here with the first patient data. So it does reflect, we can get a bit despondent about the 12 months at times, but certainly it does reflect what that data means to people who understand what the data means. But we're outperforming our competitors as well. So when you look at the benchmarks, the stock is actually behaving itself pretty well. Shareholder mix, we continue to see an increase in institutional shareholding as we move forward. That's a good thing. Obviously, institutions are able to give greater amounts of capital and be far more stable. They're not looking to trade. They're looking for the end result here. And still 63% held here in Australia, upwards of 21 in the US, and the rest covered around the world. We do have some big investors in Europe now as well. And you see the breakdown, 68% of the stock, is held with the top 40 shareholders. The big ones being L1 here in Australia, Rafi Lam and his team, Perceptive up in New York, and SIO. SIO is our biggest investor for many. These are New York-based funds. Both of them are physician-led. And this company has a physician on the team who advises as well. So you see the bigger holders know the science because they've got doctors in their team. And that's why they're the biggest holders, probably because they can read and understand the science. We've got an incredible team. It's maybe challenging, if you're not in the space, to understand what you need to get a job like this done. All right? We're not knocking this out in someone's garage and wherever. You have people professionally from the industry, and the one thing I can tell you is that the majority of the company is technical, right, as it has to be at this point. The physicians who we work with are known with the other companies. They've worked on other projects with Medtronic, with Edwards, with the big companies. They're also known by Wall Street. Doctors that I'll show you in a minute, the big funds call them directly. So these people are very well known. Have told me that this is the best engineering development team they've ever worked with in Medtech, and I mean against the big companies. So we've been able to attract people who are here because of the product. A lot of the folks in the engineering, the technical side, also want this on their CV. At some point, you're going to have the market-leading TAVR. You want to be able to say 5 years from now, I was on that team. You don't want to be on the second team. So we get the right people, and we're probably about 2 years ahead of schedule to what it takes to get a product like this through the process. That has a dollar value saving when you shave off that 2 years, but more importantly, it's because this team is so talented and so committed. And then the rest of the supporting structures and infrastructure headcount, as you can see. What I also love is diversity. We have an incredibly diverse team in Perth in the manufacturing facility, and also in Minneapolis. People come from all over. And that gives a certain flavor to the company that I really enjoy. So I'm going to talk really quickly about aortic stenosis now, switching gears. We're going to move to the forward view of where we're going. And there are some new shareholders on the register who are online or who will watch this later, also in the States, who may not know. But basically, we've created a product that replaces this particular part of your anatomy. This is a disease that does not have any pharmacotherapy. So you can't treat this disease with a drug, and you will die from it if you're not treated. Those are the simple facts. Now, this is what a healthy valve looks like inside of a human patient. That's when you're born. Hopefully you look like that. Although not so good for this guy because it's been explanted. This is what a valve looks like when you have aortic stenosis. And essentially what you're looking at is all of this nasty calcification around the leaflets, these 3 leaflets here. This is a valve that opens and closes. Now what that does is reduces the opening of the valve, called the EOA, brings it right down and makes those leaflets very heavy. They don't behave properly when your heart's pumping behind them. And so that opening gets narrower. And what happens, like your garden hose? When you turn a nozzle on your garden hose, the pressure goes up. Same thing happens here. The pressure through the aorta increases a lot, and that's how you measure this disease, and that's how you define the severity of this disease. A measurement that some of you will know called mean gradients. It's measured in millimeters of mercury. That's how they diagnose you. So that valve, if you're wondering, sits around here in the bottom of the aorta. That's the bit you've got to replace. That's a healthy valve. So you can see the difference. It should look like this, looks like this. So you're getting blood being forced through a smaller hole. And for the context, numbers, 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury is normal through here. Through here. Once you get into the disease state, you get up to severe, it's 40 to 50 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so it goes up quite dramatically, and that's at rest. If you get up to go to the bathroom, go whatever, go shopping, that can go up to 80, 90, 100. And we've treated patients who are at rest in their 90s and 100s who are very, very sick. Life-threatening, as I said, 1 in 8 elderly Australians has this disease. It is chronically underdiagnosed and undertreated in spite of the sheer size of the market. The actual available market is much, much bigger. It's not about dollars and cents. More's the point, there are a lot of patients out there who would benefit from being treated who probably aren't right now. It's not a disease where you can look at someone and say, oh, they're overweight or they smoke or whatever. It really can affect anybody. It is really about patients. There's a feel-good aspect to when you get to the privilege that I have to go into the OR, come out of the OR and see these patients the next morning. This lady, I absolutely adore. She's absolutely gorgeous. She's a patient. I'm going to show you a quick interview we had, but the relevance of this particular lady, if those of you who were in the room 2 years ago when we went live to the OR, she was in that group of patients being treated. So she is 2 years post-treatment. Every single one of our patients, by the way, is alive. Now, in a disease where people die, even 2-year mortality is, for 100%, is quite high. So all of our patients are still going, and that says a lot about how normal this valve actually is compared to the other treatments. But let's have a listen to this lady. It is translated, okay, because it was in Tbilisi, Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today at the Tbilisi Heart and Vascular Center talking to a patient who had a TAVR DurAVR procedure about 2 years ago. I'm joined by Dr. Maduri, Dr. Jivense, as well as the patient, Ms. Lali. So thank you very much for taking the time and thank you for participating in our study.
დიდი მადლობა მოხვედრით და მონაწილეობის ჩვენს კვლევაში.
დიდი მადლობა მოწვევისთვის.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. I wonder if you could share with us the symptoms and how you felt before you had the procedure.
შეგიძლიათ დაგვიჭეროთ სიმპტომები, რომელსაც მოიხსნით პროცედურამდე.
პროცედურამდე პიკარდია შესაბამისად, ადვილი დაყრილობა, ქოშინი, თავბრუსხვევის შეგრძნება, ეს ყველაფერი იყო პროცედურამდე.
I frequently had shortness of breath, weakness, and high blood pressure, and living with symptoms was very difficult for me.
Thank you. And what helped you then decide to join the study?
რამ გადაგაწყვეტინათ, რომ მონაწილეობა მივიღოთ ყველაში?
ერთ-ერთი კლინიკაში მის აუცილებლად.
Doctors at the clinic whom I was consulting, me and two of my colleagues, Teona and Mari, explained me the benefits of the procedure, and this way I made the decision to undergo the procedure.
And Dr. Jivense, you were part of that team, so how did you describe it to her?
Yeah, she had severe aortic stenosis, and she had shortness of breath and dizziness, and she was heart failure, NIHA3, and for her living with such symptoms was very difficult, and now we see that she's so thankful for us. Yeah.
And maybe again, Dr. Jivense, for you, what would be the alternative for her if there was no DurAVR, if there was no study? What would you have done?
That would be open heart surgery for her, and she's 75 years old, and it would be very difficult for her because she had already had open heart surgery, and it would be very difficult for her, for sure.
Could you give a few comments on that, please?
Yeah, I think that it's incredibly challenging for a patient to have a redo open heart surgery at her age and with the other issues going on. And we've been very fortunate to have our great partners here at the Tbilisi Heart and Vascular Institute to allow them not to just be able to have a TAVR, but truly a TAVR that offers them the best possibility of quality of life improvement that anything else can offer.
Is discomforting and moments.
On the second day of the procedure, she was quite active, could walk around, and did not have any symptoms at all. She said that she did not have any rehabilitation, just went out and could walk around. She could get back to his daily life.
დაუბრუნდით ჩვეულ რიტმს, ცხოვრებას ვიწერით და აბსოლუტურად ის დისკომფორტი, რომელიც ჰქონდა ამ პროცედურამდე, გამქრალია დღეს.
She said that her quality of life is improved. She's a musician, plays to the piano, and goes to the work every single day, and she's quite active and very thankful for you.
Yeah, so my next question was really about how did you feel before and after procedure, 2 years later, since you've had this now, how do you feel? How's your life?
გამიმჯობესდა თუ არა ხომ მდგომარეობა? ეხლა ნორმალურად ძალიან Said comfort.
She feels very comfortable
Well.
and she advised everybody to do this
Asset
procedure.
უმაღლესი დონის პროფესიონალების ჯგუფი იყვნენ.
She advised other people's patients who is going to undergo this procedure, even without thinking to agree this, even without thinking too long time, because they will be satisfied with the results achieved, and even when they start with a great professional that you are.
Thank you very much.
Wow. That was my question, so thank you very much. And I'm so pleased that you're doing so well. We're very happy that we can work with great physicians and come to Georgia and bring physicians from the US to help patients like yourself here and have good outcomes as well.
დიდი მადლობა, ჩვენ ძალიან კმაყოფილები ვართ, რომ ჩამოდივართ თქვენთან და ძალიან ბედნიერები ვართ, რომ ვიმუშაობთ ესეთ ექიმებთან ერთად.
ნამდვილად, მაღალი დონის ექიმები არიან, აი ისვისთანაც მე მქონდა შეხება, ნუ თქვენ გულისხმობ და შემდეგ უკვე ეს ჯგუფი არის საერთოდ.
She is very thankful to the doctors, I mean Georgian, Tbilisi Heart and Vascular and Anteris people, whole team. She is very grateful of it.
Dr. Mitral is always happy when he comes.
Thank you. We're so glad to put them.
That's what you're invested in, that kind of outcome, but it also drives market leadership and commercial adoption. The two do go together. A couple of things to note. Like I said, that lady was in the cohort of patients, one of our early groups, the second cohort, when we went from the AGM live to the OR. She was one of the patients that day. Okay, so we're up to 64 patients in the past 12 months. This is a significant milestone. Again, not like pharma or phase 2 where I spent my life. 64 patients in Medtech with a physical product is a big number. It takes you way beyond the boundaries of reasonable doubt. It takes you way beyond the boundaries of risk with regards to a product like this. Back in the day, before they changed the process in Europe called the MDR, so only a few years back, unfortunately, used to get registrations for these kind of products with about 30 patients, just to give you context of what's required. Again, because a physical product is very, very different to a chemical product. I've gone through 36 drug launches globally in my career. Sometimes in phase 3, you have drugs fall over. Sometimes in phase 2, you have drugs fall over because a compound, a chemical will react differently, possibly in everyone in this room because of our differences in the immune system and so on. A physical product does not. We put the valve into you, it'll do pretty much the same thing. So that's why your numbers in your phase 3 are much smaller. And that's why there's much more predictability in terms of you getting out the other side in terms of risks with a medical device product. So it's a big number. Now I'm going to quickly switch gears around the market because I'm not sure that we've spent enough time talking about this with our shareholders to understand what drives adoption. And you'll see I keep coming back to adoption because people obviously are looking now at our commercial pathway because that's where we're headed. The market is divided into roughly 2 styles of TAVR, right? And therefore 2 players actually. One is a balloon expandable, and you see that here. That's the balloon inside of the valve. That balloon is inflated when the valve is put in place. It's deflated when it's removed. So this is how you expand the valve out. The other one is called a self-expander. You see it looks a little bit like at the top of an hourglass there. It does not have a balloon, all right? So it relies on the radial strength of the frame as it comes out of the catheter to hold it in place. This guy has 65, 70% market share. This guy has 30% market share. And it has been the same for nearly a decade. Now, what drives market share? Clinical results are important. This is not a drug. This is a product that has a doctor behind it. They have to physically do something with this product. If it is not easy to use, they will not use it. So having the best valve in the world is important. We've created a whole new class of valve that matters. But if you can't land it where it needs to go, it doesn't matter at all. So you've got to have both things together. And I raise this because it does come up a fair bit. Self-expanding is harder to use. Doctors will tell you it's unpredictable. They pop back out. I've seen that myself. They bounce around. They're not easy to use. You tend to use them in smaller sized patients. Actually have slightly better hemodynamics than a balloon expander. But doctors 100% of the time will tell you they prefer to use a balloon. Also, every other procedure they do, interventional cardiologists, is balloon-based. Angioplasties and a whole bunch of stuff is all balloons. So they use balloons all day, every day. Very, very simple to use. Now, the market, in spite of the fact it is so chronically undertreated, but that is improving, even just the patients we're treating, around about 10 billion US by 2028. The light blue is valve and valve. That means a second valve put in when the first one has failed. Now, we're seeing an increase in this. The best guesstimates are about 30% of the market. We don't really know. And we're only seeing this now is because TAVRs were approved for use in younger patients in 2019. Okay, so we're only seeing those patients hit the 3, 4, 5-year curve now and failing. So you can roughly guess that the life of a valve is 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes a little bit longer. And so you're seeing this number grow. Valve and valve, not our main show. It's here. It's untreated aortic stenosis. We have the best results in the market. As it turns out, we're pretty good here as well. So these patients do need these replacement valves or again, they will die. So it's growing quite dramatically. So another $3 billion plus US dollars there. Just really quickly here, the market was always divided between surgery and catheter-based devices, and back in the day, they would crack your chest. As you just heard about our patient there, she was too sick to have her chest cracked again. So that second valve, that third valve is going to be a catheter-based valve. Surgical valves were only passed for the first time by catheter-based valves in 2019, right? So surgery was the main game. By 2028, 15% of the market will be surgery, 85% will be TAVR. And a lot of that's going to be DurAVR, right? So you can see how dramatically the market has shifted. Obviously, it's a lot less invasive. Patients want this, even if they can have a surgical valve, they still want a TAVR valve for reasons we can all relate to. Now, let's look at the market. I talked about balloon expandable and self-expanding. This matters for our product. We had a blank piece of paper. So I could make, or we could make a balloon expander, or we could have made a self-expander. We had that choice some years back. We put the advisory board together for that very reason. We wanted input as to what they wanted, because it's not going to be commercially viable if we get that part wrong way back then. Too late to change it now. Unanimously, they said balloon expandable, but with better hemodynamics than the current market-leading product. So this is the current market-leading product. It is a balloon expandable valve. We went down the path of making a balloon expandable platform. Obviously, we had to look at the intellectual property, the patents. We had to do a whole bunch of things. We had to redesign the technology to make a better technology so we could obviously pass the IP stuff, which I'll show you in a minute. This is the balloon expandable, the self-expanding category down here. And as you can see, the market just hasn't shifted. And it's all about the delivery. It's all about the ease of use. Interestingly, as we move forward, the forecasts and projections are that balloon expandable, which is only one, we are the other one, will slightly grow. Now, this graph here doesn't take DurAVR into account, right? But here we sit in this block. This is where we're going. And this is outside the US. The split's a bit more different in the US, largely driven by price in Europe. But ease of use in the States, which is the biggest market, is what really drives adoption, which is why we went down that path. Again, all very deliberate. Talked about valve in valve. Now, what's interesting, as you saw from that market share, the majority of first valves are the balloon expanding, right? But that's why the market is 60, 70%. So a lot of patients are getting this first valve. They come back in with a self-expander for the second valve, for valve in valve, because in a small annulus or small patient vessel, which is what it looks like when the first valve has failed, you're in a smaller space because you've got all the junk in there. You will use the self-expander because you get slightly better hemodynamics. Tons of compromises to do this, but that's all they have. And I'll show you why we work in both spaces. Here's a quick look at the market, right? Where we've got that available patient pool, we're treating this available patient pool. So the market is really, really undertreated and still driving those very big numbers, 10 billion US dollars. I believe, my personal view, when we look at the incidence and prevalence of this disease, is that diagnosis will move up, treatment numbers will move up. And I think a lot of that will be certainly driven by DurAVR because of its very normalized results when we get those products into patients and its safety profile. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Now, go to market. This question comes up a lot. And I often get folks say, Wayne, you can't go to market. I don't know how they know that because the guy might work at McDonald's or wherever, but people tell me that. You need thousands of reps, and you need this, and you need that. This is the bit I've been doing my whole career around the world. And so this is the bit we know. There is a playbook that you have to follow. But I would say the really difficult part of where we are as a company was creating a product that's actually commercially relevant and clinically viable. That's the hard part. You've got a blank piece of paper. There is no guarantees. In fact, it's very, very risky. We started with ADAPT, which is great. The go-to-market part, I'm not going to say it's easy, But there's a playbook. And if you've done it, and all of the people in my team are global healthcare executives, they've done this multiple times around the world. And the book was written 4 years ago. When we wrote our plan, you don't get out the other side with an approved product and go, now what? Let's hope we get there. You have a plan. So the commercial plan was written about 4 years ago for this product. The product was designed around the commercial plan. It's not a random event that the product looks like it does. There was a gap in the market. We had to fill it. We didn't know whether we could, but we had to, because no one's going to buy the product if we don't. So there's no point developing a product that nobody's going to use. Obviously, that's not a good investment thesis. Medical Advisory Board, as you know, was chosen many years back. They were not random. They were chosen deliberately. They represent the biggest centers in the United States. They are the number 1, 2, 3 physicians in the world and acknowledged as such, not by me, but by their peers. They're on the podiums. They're published. They're known by Wall Street, and they're known by Edwards, Medtronic, and everybody else. These people move the needle. They designed this product. Now, they were put in place so that when we go to market, we've got our foot in the door with the big centers that have the big volumes. So you start to see where we're headed. It's a playbook. You follow it. Product, like I said, was designed to fill a need in the market. It wasn't just designed and thrown at the wall to see if it would stick, right? We knew what the gap was. It was hemodynamics, ease of use. We didn't know whether we could achieve it, but that was what we had to achieve for the company to be viable. Fortunately for everyone in this room, we did. Clinical benefit, ease of use, normal flow. So we understood not just this part we had to hit. We had to hit this part. And that's where the advisory board helped us. You know, we may not have known to make a balloon expandable. Maybe we made a self-expander. I can tell you, if we made a self-expanding valve, people wouldn't use it. I could tell you everything about the valve, that'd be great. But if we made another self-expander, no one's going to touch it. So this stuff matters and goes back to here. And like I said, everything starts with the business plan. Starts here 4 or 5 years ago. This is the first physician-designed catheter, so I'm told, ever. So this means they have very clear ownership of that delivery system. Right? The physicians built this based on, these are people that had thousands of TAVRs between them. So they have a lot of experience. So when they design a TAVR or a delivery system, it's around experience from a user's perspective. Therefore, you know it works and it does. And we had one clear remit, which I'll talk about in a second, around the delivery system, which was it had to be easier to use or as easy to use as the market leader. And there had to be a zero to lower learning curve. We've achieved to doctors who do a lot of Sapien, which is a market leader, particularly at Cleveland Clinic, where they do a lot of these. And they use our product, and they'll say, if you use a Sapien, you can use a DurAVR without training. And that's huge for adoption, right? We don't have to have people training them how to do it. I've been in these procedures. They're knocking them out in 20 minutes now with our product. It's pretty incredible to watch. Launching is not launching the world. I've done that with drugs, where you have thousands of people around the world. We do not have to roll the tanks and take on the world in one hit. The biggest market is in the States. There are a lot of centers there, but 20 or 40 control the real volume. All right, so it's a stepwise approach. Now, of these 20 or 40, we're already in the door with most of them. Right, we obviously got those relationships. They use these products and have been in our clinical studies as well. 5 to 10 centers in EU to start with, in the big markets, Germany, France, UK. And therefore, we will step up our resources as we get moving. Now, a lot of adoption is driven on the podium, and that's why we're on the podiums. Okay, so obviously physicians listen to what's being said up there. It matters. Break even, just on these numbers here, is about 6 to 9 months post-launch. So we have modeled out our forecast for the next 5 or 6 years. They get a bit rubbery at 6, but about 4. I'm still comfortable that those numbers are correct, which drives our net present value. So adoption, we just talked about. Superiority, ease of use, advanced science, physician peer advocacy, hands-on experience. If you do not have one of these things, if you're missing one point here, you will not get adoption. And again, I raise this because it comes up a lot. Some of the funds who are quite experienced, maybe not on our register, will tell me, people won't adopt it. Doctors have these relationships. They use products for a bunch of reasons. I know all that. 25 years in global healthcare, as the rest of my team. So let's have a look at this stuff. Clinical superiority, boom. This is the phase 2 EFS study. We call it EFS in Medtech, but you might know it as phase 2. I noted yesterday a company had promising phase 2 results, got a 15% share price increase. Promising. This was market leading, these results. These are not just promising, they are 30% superior to the market leader. This is a study that's done in the US. Amazing safety profile, no PVL, stuff you can read later. 7.5 millimeters of mercury, okay? The competitor, the market leader in this size, these are smaller valve patients, will be about 15. Well published, well documented, not a made up. So we're at least half of where they are. That's incredible. And again, not random. The other number to watch out for is this one, DVI. Really, really critical. This is a function of 1. So the closer you are to 1, the better you are. The market leader is about 4.4, which is anything under 0.5 is actually pretty nasty. The results are consistent, and that's another important point. You know, it's one thing is to get people off the table. The other thing is to look at them at 12 months, 2 years. You just saw Miss Lally. She looks amazing. She's energetic. She's 74. She was really sick when I first saw her 2 years ago, and you can't tell it's the same lady. Again, mean gradient's very consistent here. You see the EOA you want as a number that gets bigger, and you want the mean gradient as a number that gets smaller from starting. So these mean gradients were in the 50s on average. These are very sick patients getting down here, and the EOAs go from 0.69 up to 2, which is about normal for this size patient. Most of the patients are fitting in the normal range. You have a couple of outliers. You'll always have somebody who's 1 or 2 standard deviations away from the mean. But of course, this is exactly what you want to see from hemodynamics at 30 days, and also the EOA, the opening of the valve. Now, this is looking at the first patient, our patient who we just saw fitted into the cohort 2. This is the most recent cohorts, 4 to 5. And again, what this really points out is just the consistency of data. Data got slightly better over time. And of course, when you do your first, let's call it the phase 1 kind of study, the first in humans, you're still dialing things in. You're testing that to see if there's anything that you need to change. Not on the valve. The valve was working great, but just on the delivery system. So we got slightly more dialed in as we move forward. But I think the critical thing here, and it speaks to how we move through the regulatory study, the registration study, is that what you see in the first group is what you see in the second group. These numbers don't change, right? So that's why the phase 3 numbers are a lot smaller than, say, a pharma study, because the physical product, pretty much if you've got it working, it's going to work. How do we look at the competitors? This is a slide that was actually first presented by Dr. Rebecca Hahn from Columbia. She is the #1 echocardiographer in the world. Everything is ever published that people read comes from her. This is from the JACC in 2019. She did benchmark comparisons of the current products and just added us. So here is the market leader and the EOA. Here is our product. Okay, so just to give you context, this is thousands of patients here where we're getting this, deriving this data. DVI, a little bit different here. We've come down a little on the DVI. These were first done off the table. But the point is that the hemodynamics of this product are significantly better to the market leader. The delivery system is easier to use as well. Now, valve and valve is important, right? Because today when these valves fail, which is starting to happen at an increasing rate, you've got compromises. Because there's no good product for valve and valve. You just have to use what's available until we came along. Now, this is the self-expanding valve. You can see that kind of hourglass kind of shape there. This is the Sapien, the market leader. You can see this product has very constricted leaflets, so it's not a round opening here. That's part of the problem. But when you use the self-expander, which is typically where they go, because 70% of patients are getting this as first product, right? So then, by definition, you're going to fall back to this one. There are a lot of compromises. The big one is what's called coronary access. This valve has a frame that sits right up. It blocks access to the coronaries. So once you put it in, it's called jailing the coronaries. This cage here jails up the coronaries. You can't get back in there for further intervention. So patient is pretty much where they're going to be. That's all we had. Now, we've done 6 valve and valves. They've all been highly successful. We only did them because physicians recognized this valve looked very different to what's available, and they applied for them on compassionate use, which means it has to go through the regulatory process because it's not a registered product. This one was stunning, though. This was a valve in valve in valve. This patient was done at the biggest institution in Europe called the Karolinska. This patient was incredibly sick, had first surgical valve, where you can see it down here, had an evolute, the self-expanding, put into that surgical valve, and so that valve failed. And the doctors at the Karolinska deemed that there was no viable alternative for this patient. You couldn't put an Edwards valve in, you couldn't put another evolute in there. And so they applied for compassionate use with our product. And here you can see that hourglass kind of shape. That's the evolute in there, that's failed. And what you're seeing here is our product coming in, and it's being opened. In this video, you'll see the balloon expand. There you go. So you can see our valve has now been put in here. It's the only valve they could get in there. Expanded inside of that failed evolute. All right? It's hard enough when you haven't got that junk around. It's obviously even more challenging. And what's incredible here is if you look at the gradients, remember I said this is how we measure this disease. Now, this patient has always been sick. They had a lot of comorbidities. So when they got their first surgical valve, the mean gradient wasn't great. With our product, we'd be looking at 5 to 7 or 8 off the table. So he had already a pretty high mean gradient. They put the Evolute in. He was at 31. He's touching severe stenosis, but that's all they could do for the patient. As that failed, he hit 41. When they put the DurAVR in, on top of all this junk in here, we got him down to 18, which is a stunning number in this patient. Right? I know it's different to what we see with our first patients, but this is an incredible number. Even better than when he got his first valve. That's crazy, right? You're at the point where 2 have failed and you're still getting better numbers. This will demonstrate to you that this valve is very different to what's available. It's a different class of valve. It's clinically, very, very important and relevant. And that, of course, helps drive adoption, which is what we're talking about here. Ease of use, balloon expandable. There you go. This just shows us very quickly, again, what the importance of the catheter, if you don't recall this part of the device, the steerability part, right? That's how it crosses around the aorta. All of these things are being engineered specifically for us with IP that's specific to us. There's the valve. Of course, we have the best valve, but if you can't land it, like I said, then it's completely pointless. Commercial alignment just indicates how you align the valve once it's inside the body. Commercial alignment was not available commercially. The doctors wanted it. So this is a first. And does matter. The valve can actually perform better if you actually get it lined up to where it was originally. There's 3 points to the valve in your body, and if you can align those up properly, the orientation does actually have an impact on performance. Most of them you can't, because you put a catheter in there, you can't actually turn it once it's kind of in the space. You just kind of let it go and hope it sticks. And see the balloon go up, and the balloon goes down, and then you pull the catheter out. There it goes. So what's important to note here is just the fact that we have made, again, a very deliberate approach to the delivery system. Balloon expandable versus self-expanding. Balloons are the preferred choice. Advanced science, I love this one. Beyond the mean gradients, which we've seen are far better than the market leader, we've got the balloon expandable delivery system. We have got that so dialed in that doctors who use the market leader can use DurAVR without any training at all. That matters. Then we've got the stuff that other folks certainly don't have. Here we're looking at laminar flow. Laminar flow is critically important. That's how the blood flows through your aorta. When you're born, you have what's called normal laminar flow. The current products in the market, and as you get stenosis, that flow is disrupted. So you see here all that orange and red here. That's the blood coming through the restricted valve. All that red is turbulence. There's a lot of shear forces. It's bouncing off the aorta. And the kinetic energy is being distributed incorrectly because of that, right? There's a whole bunch of systems that link together here. Treated with DurAVR, look at this. Boom. That's pretty phenomenal. That's what a normal valve will look like. Okay, so you will not see that with any of the products in the market because they don't look like the valve in your body, whereas DurAVR does. But this has become critically important clinically. Physicians were just never able to achieve this before, so they didn't do a lot of work on it. Now that they know they can achieve it, there's a lot of work being done. And then there was a lot of clinical data that helps our position. The SMART study was just published the last couple of months. It's been about a 5-year study from Medtronic compared to Edwards, which is the market leader. And I'm just pointing this out because this is the first ever head-to-head study in TAVR, if you can believe that. What I love about it is they went into small annulus patients, so the smaller size valves, which represent about 40% of the market, and showed how they performed compared to the market leader, basically giving the platform for DurAVR when we launch, right? Because we love these group of patients. What's really interesting is that this is bioprosthetic valve dysfunction. It showed that at 1 year, a lot of the Edwards valves were dysfunctional, 41%. Having that data, I think physicians knew about this, but having it put into a publication and a study is incredible. So Medtronic did okay there, by the way. We do better. So this is really, really great for us because it creates awareness here and here, and also shows where the competition is weak without us having to do this kind of study, right? The data now exists, so it's fantastic. And here you see some of these flow dynamics. This is the market leader. Now that whole circle should be red. That's what you see when you see DurAVR. When you see DurAVR, that whole thing will be flashing red. I think some of you saw it last year when I showed it. You can see how compromised and how non-laminar that flow is. So that's what it looks like when you're treated. You are nowhere near normal. Evolut, the Medtronic product, is a little bit better, but it's not normal laminar flow. So these things matter. Well, I'll finish this section just by saying it's not random when you go to market. You write that in your business plan years and years ahead of time. The people you recruit in terms of physicians help you get that adoption. The way the delivery system's set up, and the way you address a gap in the market all come down to what you do years before you get there. I would argue with a lot of shareholders who say, well, can you launch, can you not launch? Yes. If you're invested in a company who made a product without doing those steps, the variability and the risk is much higher because you don't know whether it's going to get there. But we started with this ADAPT tissue. You all know that. It's an amazing product. It was just in a very underutilized space. It turns out the market for surgical repair globally was not huge. Whereas the market for TAVR is pretty dramatic, as we've seen. We've got the best valve. This is the only valve in this class called bioprosthetic. We created the class, and then we, of course, put the patents around it so you can't copy that. We get the results because of the design of this valve. Right now, you can't copy that. Delivery system is the third part of the puzzle. You've got to have the right delivery system. This is the first physician-designed delivery system in this space, and it works unbelievably. Physician advocacy. I do get people say, you know, we're so over hearing about the podiums. We don't actually do the podiums for the stock market. We're not desperate for headlines. We do them because we have to, because the organizers of these very big medical conferences demand, when you are at a point where we are, like coming out of our phase 2 into our phase 3, that you're on the podiums. They have to present it. The physicians have to present. So we've got New York Valve next week, which is where I'm headed, which is the biggest medical conference. Now, physicians go to these conferences, of course, from all over the world, so they do see it. The doctors chosen, again, you know, they have influence. This gentleman here is Dr. Mike Reardon. He's been on the ad board since day one when we had a blank piece of paper. He's number 1, 2, 3 in the world. He's running a huge Medtronic study right now. Lovely, lovely gentleman from Texas. He is, again, well-known by every company out there. He's well-known by Wall Street. He's well-known by all the physicians. He's also our co-study chair for our phase 3. That's huge. So that level of advocacy matters. The podiums matter. This gentleman here is Marty Leon. Marty, again, top 1, 2, 3 in the world. TAVR exists because of this gentleman here. He's out of Columbia in New York. He's running the other big TAVR study, which is the Edwards study right now for low risk. So Mike is running the Medtronic one. Marty is running the Edwards one. They have agreed to be our co-study chairs for our phase 3. Now, that's huge, and no matter how you look at these things, people take notice of that. And why would they do that, right? Because these gentlemen don't just jump on anything that moves, of course, because their reputations career-wise matter, right? So they're not going to get behind something that's going to fall apart and make them look bad. You get folks like this, which we've had since day one, very deliberately, around the promise of what this product is, which is the next generation into TAVR. They want to be associated with it. They want to be able to present the data, and they want to show that they were behind this product and helped to develop it. So these are all the steps that need to be taken. And just a couple of quick quotes. You are really looking at the top 3 people in the world here. I talked about Rebecca before from a point of view of echocardiography. What she says matters. But here's Marty here, you know, mind-boggling. These are not comments that these people make lightly, by the way, right? Hemodynamics DurAVR is so fantastic. It has ease, reliability, accuracy, the balloon expandable valve, no turbulence, so that matters. Mike here, hemodynamics DurAVR, first absolutely stunning, safety and implantability stunning. All right, that matters. I mean, not sure everybody understands this sometimes as an investor. These are not just Joe Schmo from wherever. I mean, these are incredibly important, well-known, influential physicians in this space. Hands-on experience, we talked about that, but, you know, for adoption, getting physicians to use this product means when you go commercial, they know how to use the product. Now, it's easy to use anyway, but in the States, we had a lot of Cleveland Clinic, which is the biggest cardiac center in the world, right? So our physicians in Cleveland Clinic have got a lot of hands-on experience. Of course, they're seeing the data. And that phase 2 EFS study was really a good study. We had all comers. But now I want to switch gears into the phase 3 study. So this stuff here, of course, we're going through a process with the FDA. So it's not something I can announce every other day for the stock market, unfortunately, but doesn't mean we aren't, obviously working. Everyone wants to get to market as quickly as possible, just so you know, we're not sitting back with our foot off the gas. We really are pushing them. I'm very, very happy with the discussions we're having right now on the pivotal study, the phase 3. This will be the first all comers. What that means is mild, moderate, severe patients. Every other TAVR before has been a severe only or a moderate only or a mild only patient category, which means you'd have to have a lot more studies, right? So we're super happy that we have been, looks like we're going to get all comers randomized, right? That means half of them will be DurAVR, half will be standard of care, okay? So that's a great outcome. This is not a massive study. I can't go too much into the numbers right now because we're not fully there. We have presented the biostatistics. We presented the math, for superiority and statistical significance, which you of course have to do. Everything here is driven by math, by the way. The FDA says you can have 10 patients, 10,000 patients, whatever, based on the primary endpoint and the math. So our math supports a number that I know that we certainly like. And then, of course, when you look at that randomized study, only half of them are going to be DurAVR. So it's very manageable. These patients, of course, happen every day of the week. They're randomized, but they're all there. They're just happening normally. So really like this. Primary endpoint at 1 year. 10-year follow-up doesn't affect commercialization. And the primary endpoint is non-inferiority. Now, remember, we're 30% superior to the market leader. I'm not going to say anything else. I mean, that's it's just as good as it gets. Now, valve and valve. A lot of people ask me about valve and valve. You see the results. We've only got 7 patients, but it clearly can tell based on the design of the valve that we've got a product that's probably very viable. We went backwards and forwards on quicker pathways, longer pathways. The quickest pathway is to add this into the phase 3 and get it done. Remember, the phase 3 obviously is going to be starting shortly, but the valve and valve registry does not affect, by the way, the approval of this side. Neither of these actually interact. We're just getting it done. Rather than running 2 studies, we're going to run 1. A lot more cost effective and probably a lot quicker at the end of the day. There's literally dozens of these patients out there. So all comers, as I said, and head-to-head, again, never happened. So in this study, you're going to have data from DurAVR, from SAPIEN, and from Evolut. Remember, I just showed you the SMART study was the first ever head-to-head TAVR study. This will probably be the second. You can see the advocacy we get. I can't make too fine of a point of this, but the biomimetic valve is the first in class. We created that. There's just huge enthusiasm because the clinical results are so differentiated to what's available. And so when we talk to Marty Leon and these folks who really control how centers will recruit, you get a lot of, this is going to happen very quickly. People know that it's better than what's available and it's easy to use. They want to enroll this study quickly. There's not a 5-year study. I can't give you a timeline now, although we're closing in on that. But expect a fairly quick study here. So here's the enrollment. The follow-up phase is 12 months, and then the review and then approval. This is pretty standard stuff. This is a category B, which doesn't happen a lot, which means we actually get reimbursed for the product that's being used in the study. So we are selling it. It's $25,000 US here, so it's capped. The market price of these products is slightly higher, but of course that's way above the cost of goods. What I'd also like is that while you're going through this follow-up period, we will apply and probably get it, continued access. So hospitals who are in the study finish the study but can continue to use the product, which means places like Cleveland Clinic, who are the biggest cardiac center in the world, they have a lot of patients coming through. So even before approval, knock wood, we should be able to continue sales of the product to those centers. So you saw the number of centers up there. We've expanded that number of centers so we can actually move here, even though more patients will come from fewer places. All right, switching gears completely. I have to move along here because we've taken a bit of time. You all know that we have this other part of the portfolio with a company called V2V that I announced last year. It was another part of 2023. This is a little bit like DurAVR. We've approached the space in the market with physicians. Columbia University is involved here again, so hugely important, for a space in the mitral repair. It's called edge-to-edge or tear procedure. So this is not replacing the valve. The mitral valve, of course, being different to the aortic valve. It's repairing the valve. And you can see a couple of pictures here. So hugely important. You can see how the market's broken down here. We have tricuspid and we have mitral. Both of these are pretty elusive. There are treatments for these now, but they're challenging to treat. I'll focus on mitral. But it's a very big space. Here's mitral's about $19 billion in the US at the moment. That includes replacement and surgical. Okay, so that's what's happening at the moment. Replacement is what we do with 4C. So if you saw earlier, I talked about 4C, who we provide the tissue to. That's replacement. They've made an actual valve for mitral. Very challenging. Then you've got all these functions of how they repair from surgery through to edge. Tricuspid is the $6 billion, same kind of breakdown in the market there. And you can see where those valves are positioned in the heart, as opposed to the one we work on, which is up here. So here's the dynamics of how this market breaks out. Tricuspid repair and mitral repair, as you can see, the red and the blue. So very, very big parts of the market and growing quite rapidly. My personal view is that replacement is very challenging and that repair will continue to grow, particularly with the product we're working on, because it's a better system than what's available at the moment. So the better you make it, the easier you make it, the more repairs are going to be done versus replace, which is has a high mortality and very difficult to treat. Market growing quite quickly. Two competitors in the market, lo and behold, our friends over here and our friends at Abbott. So you can see this market's been around for a little bit. You can see the numbers here that Abbott really has the majority of the market share with MitraClip. Good product. The folks that have designed the product we're working on here use a lot of this. One of them is again, the best mitral surgeons in the world, and they know the limitations of these devices and have created something to fix those limitations, and that's where we stepped in. Pascal product, obviously a lot less revenue for Edwards, but certainly growing. So these two I would call first-gen edge-to-edge repair devices. We're working on the next gen. But when you add up the portfolio and you look at the investment thesis for Anteris, you got to look at the space that we're in called structural heart. So TAVR, of course, is a big market. When you add all of these together, there are some significant numbers that include TAVR. This is not our total market, that's the total market. This is US dollars here. And mitral and tricuspid repair. And believe it or not, here it is in working. What you're looking at here is a mitral valve. I was at this lab just about 2 weeks ago. So the mitral valve, again, a little bit different. What you're really wanting to look at here you can see the clips that came from our product, right? So we've got 3 clips instead of 2. That's the first thing. And what you try and do is when you repair a mitral valve, you bunch it together, you pull the leaflets together. So you're kind of trying to create a coaptation here. And what you want to see is those leaflets come together perfectly. And they do, right? In an unhealthy valve, that coaptation is not looking like that. So these are conceptual. We're moving forward pretty quickly, but looks like we're almost there. So this has moved up in my mindset in terms of its risk and ability to get to market. All right, patents really quickly. As you'd expect, we put IP on everything from day one, from when we started to where we are, and we continue to get a lot of IP. Just in the last 18 months, we got another 19 approved, not submitted. We submit tons. These are the ones that come through as approval. Obviously, that adds to the commercial viability. You obviously want to be protected. No point if you're not. I'll just skip through those, but they cover delivery, valve, everything else. NASDAQ, all right. There are things I can and cannot say about the NASDAQ, but a lot of people ask me about the NASDAQ and my view on that. I personally, as John said, he sat on a NASDAQ board. I sat on a NASDAQ board as well in California to a company we later sold. It's significant what it can do in terms of the available capital and in terms, I guess, in the end, as well as dilution, meaning the dilution is less. We are encumbered by the 15% rule on the ASX, right? Which means you've got capital overhangs continuously floating around because you can only raise 15%. I don't get that rule at all, but there it is. Now let's look at what a market cap should look like. I think you've seen all the data, you've seen the physician support. You know this product is as de-risked as you're ever going to get in medical. I can say that again from my career background. But, you know, Edwards here has 65% of the market, and you saw how we compare to Edwards, right? Significantly different in terms of the clinical outcome. Their current TAVR revenue is about 6 billion Aussie. And then there's a little bit more revenue in their company made up of the Pascal product I just showed and a few other things. So their market cap is 8.7 times their revenue, or about 79 billion Australian dollars, right, on those sales. Now, 65% of the revenue is TAVR. And if you look at our company, of course, our TAVR is better than their TAVR. Plus, we've got the edge-to-edge. So you start to do some calculations, and we have a net present value. It doesn't look like this, but the NPV is a model I used corporately at Roche and at Merck globally. It's not a Mickey Mouse number. The NPV is significantly different to the market cap, and it's hyper-conservative. But if you take 5% market share, and you saw the planning that goes into this, the physicians we work with control a lot more than 5% market share, and they're there for that reason as well as a bunch of others. Then you start to do just the normal multiple that these guys have, and you can start to see these numbers, right? They're not pie in the sky. If you think about the risk of this product coming to market, is extremely low at this point, right? The risks that we've had to go past in the previous years, getting it clinically relevant, is it going to be superior, all those things, we've passed those risks. So the risks have come significantly lower. And a phase 3 for medtech is not risky like a phase 3 in pharma, for example. So you can see what's possible here. These are just illustrative of revenues times multiples of what's currently available. Then my friends at Shockwave in the States here, I know the CEO pretty well. This is a company that's interesting. They just got picked up for $13 billion US by J&J. They listed on the NASDAQ. It's a US company, listed just around COVID, which was pretty nasty, at about $17. 4 years later, they're trading at $3.30. All right, so there is a pool. If you're viable like we are, and we know a lot of folks in New York, it's not like they don't know us. The analysts know us, the companies know us. If you're viable, you're going to be on that path because everybody knows you're either coming to market or you're getting acquired. In this case, these guys came to market first. They got about $700 million in revenue, which is a smaller potential revenue compared to what we have, but then they got taken out, all right, for $13 billion. I do know they got offered about $250 million somewhere back here by one of the medtechs. He stuck it out. Doug is a tough guy. He stuck it out for 4 years, and his shareholders were extremely happy at $13 billion. So I'll start with these ones. These are there because they have to be. There can be no assurance Anteris will complete a potential dual listing. ASX rules dictate that I say that. Any potential dual listing is subject to all the customary conditions. Okay, let's go to the interesting ones. So we are working on this, as it says there. It's not a discussion that we think we'd like to do it. Obviously, a lot of work has been done for the past 12 months, and there is a lot of work here. So we continue down that path. Obviously, we know why the NASDAQ would be good for us. We know what it will do for the market cap, and we know what it does for capital, and we're not encumbered by the 15% rule. So you can kind of be one and done with the cap raise that gets us right through our pivotal study. That matters a lot. Even if you don't buy a share in that cap raise, you're gonna do a ride out of that because the market cap will start to hit the mathematical fair value or the net present value. There is a target for this listing of the second half of this year. Okay, so you can go and get an idea where we are. I can't comment beyond that as to where the documentation and paperwork may or may not be. And so where market conditions aside, there are a few other things that I'm still going to look at, but that's pretty much the target timeline for us at the moment. Obviously goes to shareholder votes. There's a bunch of hurdles in front of us to get through, but these are the indicative timelines that we're working to. So really, it's just left to see what you can expect from us in the coming 12-month period. I think first thing is, we don't have financial results, so we can't really confirm guidance, but as an equivalent to guidance, I think we can absolutely confirm as a company with all conviction that the physicians who advocate for us and tell you this is going to be the market-leading product are right. It's clinically relevant, it is competitive, and the data now is consistent. You see from the first patient to the last patient that we are 30+% better than the market-leading product. I think you now understand the delivery system as well. And so as we move forward in the next 6 to 12 months, of course, we have to present these ongoing clinical milestones, but you can expect FDA approval for the pivotal study, the commencement of that study, the NASDAQ listing potential will be in that mix, the first in humans for our valve-in-valve for that mitral repair that I showed you. The patient count outside of the FDA study should top between 80 and 100 in the next few months. This matters, by the way, because the more patients you have, obviously the more viable. To continue to add patients in and around studies is really important. Obviously, a lot more patents coming, and of course, we'll see the first DurAVR revenues as a function of those studies. So thank you for your patience. As you can tell, I love telling a story. I had a lot to say today about commercialization, how the fact that this product is not random, that it exists because it was planned to exist that way, and that's why you can be confident in its commercial viability, as well as you understand why the doctors behind us, why the companies continue to engage with us and do the dance around our product, because everybody knows what this is. But a bunch of people to thank, of course, the board. who are there as sounding boards for me. I know often shareholders have their view on boards and management and directors, and I see some of the email that I get on that, but I can tell you it's critical. There's a bit of an echo chamber at times when you're in the CEO role. I've been in it multiple times in my career, but it's good to have people who are experienced. When I joined Admetus, the board were all mining guys from FMG, and that's why the company looked like it did, because none of them knew healthcare. Doesn't help you when the CEO is then going to talk to folks. These folks here, John, Mr. Medtech, you heard him before, born and bred Minneapolis, which is the Medtech center of the universe. There isn't a contact this guy doesn't have. Dr. Gu, of course, and Steve on the compliance side. David, as our Chief Operating Officer, has worked in Big Pharma. He worked alongside of me as my colleague for many years at Merck globally, so again, knows what he's doing. Matt, again, unbelievably great CFO. Thanks, Matt. And Chris, who you all see on video, everyone loves Dr. Chris. He's an incredible, still practicing TAVR physician, incredibly well-known globally. Of course, the physicians love him, we love him, he's incredible, and he doesn't sleep. So he does about still 300 TAVRs a year, right, plus our TAVRs, and he helps with development. So this has helped a lot. Go back. I talked about diversity in this team. These ladies here I particularly want to point out, this is the facility in Minneapolis. There's a very core community that does the valve manufacturing. Believe it or not, all of the companies, Medtronic, Edwards, so on, these valves are put together by hand. There is no automation. We've looked at it, but even the big companies have not been able to automate this process in a decade. So you have folks who are incredibly skilled at sewing these valves into the frames. Now, we have a lot less sutures because of the single-piece design, so ours are a lot quicker, but I just love this team. Here's some of the engineers. This is our head of R&D, Jason Quill. He's a PhD in biomechanical engineering. Incredibly smart. The product looks like it does a little part because of him. And all the other folks in our team around the world. Just a really, really great team, but you can be rest assured that we don't have people who are passengers in this company. We have less staff than we should have, so everyone has to do a lot, but they love the fact that this product they know is going to be really important globally when we get out the other side. We talked about the advisory board. You can see who these folks are. We do have advisors in Europe as well. They pretty much are the same level of people that we have in the States. So they are the #1 recruiters, centers and so on. Dr. Asgar there with Valve, Becky, Vinny, our cameraman on that patient video, is this guy here. Cleveland Clinic, Columbia. So very important people. And on the Aussie side, we have some fantastic physicians who I was able to see earlier this year as well. Carl, is the only Aussie doctor who's done an implant. Fantastic guys, all of them. Very helpful. Shareholders, I mean this incredibly sincerely. Our shareholders came with me when we were a drug company as Admetus. And I didn't even know what I walked into. I was chairman of the board. I'm just going to tell you. I came from big corporate, and I stepped into a drug company with a drug that probably wasn't going to get, well, definitely wasn't going to get there, as well as the adapt tissue in the surgical space, which was about 50 million potential revenue globally. So it's not particularly interesting. The folks that brought in or who stayed in, I can tell you had vision, because you have to. When we were baking the cake, when we pivoted the company to TAVR, no one knew what was going to come out the other side. We knew what the plan was. We knew what we had to achieve. But, you don't just make a clinically relevant product. Otherwise, there'd be dozens of Anterises, right? It's not an easy task, as you can see, and you need all of the people we showed. So for those that hung in there, that is vision. Hopefully, now you're out the other side, your faith in management, the team, and everything else is proven justifiable. And those coming in right now, you're at a perfect time. I mean, we're hitting our phase 3, obviously approvals, and you can see the results are as de-risked as they're ever going to be. I mean, you're looking at these clinical results in 60 patients now. And of course, when you're a patient with this disease, it is life-threatening, but there are 2 available alternatives. So when you decide to go into a study with an experimental product, you're taking a leap of faith, particularly in the early days, right? Now, the physicians will tell them why they should do it, and it's because it's better than what's available, but you don't know that as a patient. So I'm hugely grateful, as we all should be, that these patients volunteer to not take a commercially available product and to take our product. All of them are still alive, all right? And that's incredible in this disease state. When you've got 2 years out from your, or even longer than that in your cohorts, this is a disease where patients die even when you put valves in because they're very, very sick. I mean, it happens. Every single one of our patients is alive and, of course, doing much better because they've got this pretty much normal flow and normal valve. So to that end, I will park it. thank you very much for staying awake with me and paying attention. I do appreciate it. I know it's a long discussion, but there are a couple of things that I really need to get to. So I think, thank you again very much for attending. It's going to be a fantastic 12 months. We are at the tip of the spear right now. For all of those who have hung in there, for those of you maybe watching this online who are contemplating whether you could come in, when you look at the market cap, when you look at the NPV, when you look at the data, when you look at how we got here, you can all do the math as to what's coming next. So thank you very much.